Dealing with the debt, U.S. President Barack Obama unveils a new tax plan to raise $1.5 trillion to try and bring down the deficit. A bomb explodes in a CD market in northwest Pakistan, killing 8 people, including a policeman. Divided opinion over Iran's nuclear activities. Sharp words and accusations are exchanged at the opening of the IAEA annual conference. And monsoon rains set off one of the worst floods in Pakistan's history. It's destroyed 700,000 homes. Live from our broadcast center here in Beijing, this is CCTV News. I'm Zaka Jacob. U.S. President Barack Obama has called for $1.5 trillion in new taxes on Monday. That's part of a total 10-year deficit reduction package totaling more than $3 trillion. Now, the president says he will work with Congress to try and revamp the tax code, try and lower corporate tax rates, but any deal must raise revenue to try and bring down the deficit. David Keaton has our top story.
U.S. President Barack Obama said the current financial situation means rich Americans must make some sacrifice.
If we don't act, the growing debt will eventually crowd out everything else, preventing us from investing in things like education or sustaining programs like Medicare. So Washington has to live within its means. The government has to do what families across this country have been doing for years. We have to cut what we can't afford to pay for what really matters.
Obama's plan proposes $3 trillion in savings over the next decade, with roughly half of those savings coming from higher tax revenue. He also said the wealthier should go back to paying rates they paid in the 1990s, and that the middle class should not pay higher rates than millionaires.
I will not support any plan that puts all the burden for closing our deficit on ordinary Americans. And I will veto any bill that changes benefits for those who rely on Medicare but does not raise serious revenues by asking the wealthiest Americans or biggest corporations to pay their fair share.
Obama's recommendations will go to a congressional super committee charged with finding deficit savings of at least $1.2 trillion by November 23rd. Congress must then vote on the panel's proposal by December 23rd, or automatic spending cuts will be triggered across government agencies, and that will begin in 2013. David Keaton, CCTV.
Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner says a comprehensive tax reform is necessary to make the United States a better environment for growth and investment.
And $1.5 trillion in revenues, relative to what would happen if you just extend all the Bush tax cuts, is roughly 1% of the entire output of the American economy over that period of time. It is a modest change in revenues, and if you do it sensibly through tax reform that strengthens investment incentives, you'll make growth in the United States stronger, you'll make people more confident in the future, more likely to invest here, and that's something we should all be working towards.
All right, let's try and get detailed analysis about Obama's deficit plan. Already, the Republicans are reacting to it, saying it's class warfare. Natalie Carney is our correspondent in New York. She now joins us live. I want to just take what the president said in his speech yesterday, Natalie, at face value and say, okay, here's a basic premise. He's basically saying that America's wealthiest people should pay as much tax, if not more, than what middle-class Americans are paying. On the face of it, that sounds like good logic. Why are the Republicans opposed to it then?
Well, the Republicans have been fighting such legislation for quite a few years now. I mean, this is one big sort of tension between the Republicans and the Democrats that we've seen for quite a few years. The Republicans simply do not want to pay more taxes, more tax burden on corporations and the like. The Democrats, of course, fighting that tooth and bone, as we've seen for quite a few years, and this is what the Obama plan is putting out there. Of course, a lot of corporations saying, well, if we cut taxes to these multi-million dollar corporations, I mean, that's going to affect the job prospects within these corporations. So there's quite a ebb and flow as far as who's right and who's wrong in this particular debate. But from walking on the streets and from the people that I've spoken to here in New York City, once the announcement was made from President Barack Obama, a lot of people, at least here in New York, and let's not forget, New York is quite a democratic environment. A lot of people here in New York, so I'm speaking from that basis point, are very open-minded to President Barack Obama's suggestions and saying it's about time that he sort of stepped forward and kind of gave a tooth and bone analogy of the economy, and basically saying that this is a black and white suggestion that could very well potentially correct the economy here in America. But again, I am saying that from a New York point of view.
Well, and we know that New York is not America. America seems like a completely different country when you move away from New York. But I want to talk about the Republicans and how they've been responding to this. They've said there's no way this is going to pass muster in either house of either chamber of Congress. The Democrats know that. Even the president knows that his plan will not stand a chance in Congress. Is there a subtle change of strategy, or maybe not even a so subtle change of strategy, from this whole talk of grand bargain, which is what we heard from the president's office all of July in his talks with the Republicans? Now it's no more compromise, it's confrontation. He's basically set the gauntlet now for his re-election campaign.
Well, exactly, and that's exactly what the Republicans are arguing right now. They're saying this is a complete political ploy from President Barack Obama. He's coming out, and it's not coming from his heart, so to speak. It's sort of coming just in the forefront of his political campaign. He's sort of setting the pace for what his campaign is going to lie out in the year to come. So a lot of Republicans kind of just throwing this off as nothingness, thinking that this is just a political ploy for the Democratic Party in a whole. But again, a lot of people on the streets are saying, no, this is absolutely what we need. So, I mean, it really comes down to what Congress is going to agree upon this. Of course, this particular proposal from President Barack Obama is now going to be presented to this super committee, and they will digest all of these suggestions and then present that on November the 23rd. And of course, they have to vote on it by December the 23rd. And if it is not voted upon, if there's no sort of consensus agreed upon in the super committee, there will be automatic deductions from the deficit created after that, which will, from what I've heard, definitely sort of affect the military aspect here in America, and will start drawing down the military finances here in America.
That's not something the Republicans will support either. But it's just a quick word about how the markets have responded to this. The Dow ending 100 points down, just a shade above 11,400. I know that Obama's not exactly a darling with the markets, but what do they want to see the president do given the constraints he's operating in?
Well, it's interesting when you bring up the markets, because we were all expecting the markets to adjust somewhat. I mean, we started off the trading session in the red, and then with President Obama's announcement, we were all expecting some sort of optimism to come about in the market. But that was not the case, because here in America, we still are sort of eyeing what's happening over in Europe, and of course the situation with Greece. And so that seemed to dominate the sentiment here on Wall Street. So whatever Barack Obama said, I mean, it affected markets very, very marginally. So maybe that's something that might still be digested by investors. They're still sort of waiting for some sort of formal remarks from the Republican Party to come out, and then they will act on that. But right now, the markets are still really dominated by the situation over in Europe at the moment. So we'll have to see from sessions here on in as to how they will digest what President Barack Obama presented this session.
All right, and in case you thought that Obama's problems are quite big, I mean, it's minuscule. It's just a speck compared to what Greece is going through right now. Natalie Carney, for the moment, though, thanks very much for joining us from New York with your inputs on that story. Greece is what we're going to talk about right now, because it's now desperately trying to convince its international lenders, the European Central Bank and the International Monetary Fund, that it can meet strict budget targets in return for its next tranche of bailout money. That's about 8 billion euros in a package of 110 billion euros. Now, international lenders have told Greece in crystal clear terms it has to shrink its public sector and improve tax collection in case it wants to avoid running out of money within a question of weeks.
Many envy Greece's culture and climate, but it's a tough time to be Greek. The country's deep in recession, Unemployment's at a record 16%, and Greeks have seen wage cuts and tax increases.
We're very concerned about the situation. We are exhausted, people cannot sleep, we are suffering a great deal from the new measures.
I don't see any future. The poor have become poorer and the rich have become richer, and I don't know what the future will be like for the new generation.
It's a crucial week for Greece. Its lenders, the EU and the IMF, have made clear their patience with the Greek government's running out. Athens must urgently implement reforms and expand its austerity programme if it's to receive the next €8 billion loan. Without it, Greece could run out of money in October. Bob Traz, the IMF's representative for Greece, he says Athens still needs to shrink the public sector and chase tax evaders.
The European partners, in effect, have told you as a country that they will stand by you for as long as it takes, provided that Greece continue to pursue sound policies. So this, in our view, really places the ball in your court. The ball is in the Greek court, and implementation is of the essence.
Greek Finance Minister Evangelos Venizelos says the country needs to work together. But many analysts believe it's too late for more austerity. Manoj Ladwa from ETX Capital says it's no longer a question of if, but when Greece defaults.
It's down to whether they're able to exit certainly their debt obligations in an orderly fashion. If they're not, then there's a risk of it spreading to other banks, other sovereign nations very quickly.
Some Greek politicians say they can't take the humiliation anymore of being told what to do in return for loans. But without a new loan, Greece may not be able to pay the wages of those public sector workers who still have jobs.
Well, Greece, meanwhile, is saying it's near an agreement now with its international lenders to try and continue receiving bailout money. In fact, a Greek finance ministry official who was party to this conference call between the Greek finance minister with international lenders, he has said that they have managed to convince this troika of the EU, the IMF and the ECB that Greece is going to meet its debt obligations. The official also says that more work still needs to be done for striking such an agreement, and that talks will continue today as well. Meanwhile, here in China, the government has officially released its own iron ore price index for the first time. Now, this move is basically targeted to accurately reflect the country's iron ore market realities. Now, the index was jointly issued by the National Development and Reform Commission and the China Iron and Steel Association. The index basically consists of two sub-indices, which are domestic iron ore price and import iron ore price. Now, in August, the vice chairman of the Iron and Steel Association said, as the world's largest iron ore consumer, China needs a more transparent and a fair price index. The domestic component will be based on dry iron ore concentrate from 32 mines in 14 provinces and regions. The import prices were based on data from 8 ports in China. You're watching CCTV News. Do stay with us. Coming up on the other side, a bomb explodes in a CD market in northwest Pakistan in the city of Peshawar, killing at least 8 people. And it's divided opinion over Iran's nuclear activities. Sharp words and accusations are exchanged at the opening of the IAEA annual conference. Welcome back. In Pakistan, a bomb planted on a motorcycle has exploded outside a shop in the country's northwestern city of Peshawar. At least 4 people are confirmed dead and more than 30 wounded. The blast happened in a CD market in the Nishatarbad area of Peshawar late Monday. Several other shops also caught fire. The injured and the dead have been taken to hospital. The blast came just hours after a Taliban suicide bomber killed 8 people, including 6 policemen. The Taliban want to topple the government and impose their own version of Islam. Music and video shops will be banned in that. A Taliban spokesman told the Reuters news agency that his people will attack all police officials who take action against the Taliban. To the Middle East now, where clashes in the Yemeni capital Sana'a in the southern province of Taiz have entered a second consecutive day. At least 31 protesters have been shot dead and more than 170 injured by forces loyal to President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Witnesses say 57 people now in total have died in the 2 days of fighting. Su Yuting has the latest.
Heavy weapons were used in clashes between armed forces that have defected and government security personnel. Witnesses say snipers were shooting at protesters from rooftops near Sana University. Some of the deaths appeared to have been caused by rocket-propelled grenades. In Taiz, the country's largest city, the fighting left 5 protesters dead. Doctors in Sana and Taiz say most protesters had received shots to the head, neck or chest. Britain's Foreign Secretary William Hague deployed violence and called for political transition.
Well, I'm very concerned about the latest reports from Yemen. This situation, of course, has been simmering for a long time. This outbreak of intensified violence is very concerning.